So I'm going to turn it over to Sister Saraswati and Brother Damon, and they have something very special in store for us today.
So I'm going to start by saying that I was introduced to Out of Darkness, Heavy is the Crown by Damon, and he was so enthusiastic about this. I did take a look at it, and I was really blown away. The place on the VKM technology. I'm going to share my screen just now. Just give you a couple of. Tell me when you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
So the movie Heavy is the Crown is produced by Amadeus Christ, and there are quite a number of really key people that are narrating in the film. I'm not sure that we'll see all of them, but you can see it's certainly filled with lots of heavy hitters. Haba, Tony Browder, Dr. Wade Nobles, David Banner, Dr. Chike Akua, Atlantis Browder, Tony Browder's daughter, Sabir Bey, Taj Tariq Bey, and Mafundishi Dutchins. Right. Anyway, we are only going to talk about 3 chapters. We're going to cover myth and rituals, the Assyrian drama, and the judgment scene. But I am sure once you've seen these 3 sections, you'll understand our motivation and desire to share this information with you. I'm going to stop sharing this and switch to the DVD now. Do you want to say anything before I start the first run, Mr. Damon?
Oh, I just like to ask, how many people have seen this DVD? Just Donisha?
Is it on YouTube?
No, you have to. No, you have to order it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. But they do have the scholars. They have Anthony Broder, they have Dr. Smalls, Shaker Core. All of them are being interviewed by Amadeus Christ on YouTube.
Africa told the first story. And all of the stories that we're experiencing up to date are all based on the original mythological story.
Well, you know, religion in Africa, and no one knows its genesis. As far back as we can go, 8,000 years, and they're already worshiping the myth of Osiris. They're already ritualizing the myth of Osiris.
And myth basically is a story that's developed that tells something as it relates to the society itself.
Myth is, again, you know, we're these spirit beings. And we create tools in order to communicate the knowledge that is encoded in our spirit. And so mythology becomes one of those tools, because myth really is, in its fundamental essence, myth is a dramatization of consciousness. And so we create story to dramatize how we are aware of our awareness.
When you look at the fact that a myth is a scientific and culturally encoded container of a people's culture, one of the things that becomes clear is that there's certain things that are so profound, so deep, that they cannot be explained in everyday language. And so in order to pass on the knowledge of these things to the next generation, our ancestors began to put them in the form of stories. Because these were stories that could serve a person throughout their entire life.
The African community is steeply based in figurative language, which is what mythology, allegories, analogies are based on. When you're dealing with these issues, what you do is you take a real life situation and you create a story around it.
Myths are ways of codifying profound truths such that they will withstand the test of time. Larger than life lessons of historical personalities, or sometimes mythological personalities, or combinations of multiple personalities that identify specific traits that every person inherits.
Most people, when they hear the term myth, and I know this was certainly true of me years ago as I was growing up, if I heard the term myth, I would think of it being a story that's not true. But there's a much, much deeper understanding that you have to have of the term myth if you're gonna understand African spirituality.
All right? And so the myth becomes a way of speaking to that. And we create all these elegant, wonderful myths that people sometimes take literally.
Everybody has a story of how things became what it is. And it's all considered to be mythology because it is based on a belief.
The Akan myth of coming down on a golden chain. Well, that chain is not really what's there. It is seeing the precious element linked together that is our Genesis. See, so there's a deeper meaning here.
So every civilization of note is rooted in mythology.
It may speak of a hero that once lived. It may speak of an event that occurred. And so that out of this metaphor, out of this story, comes a ceremony that reenacts it, and that's the ritual.
And then we create rituals, and rituals are really ways to perform that reinforces the logic and the knowledge of the myth.
So, myth and rituals are two of the most essential parts of any religion. If you say you have a religion, you can guarantee you have myth, you have ritual, and you have belief.
The story then goes into a ceremony that is constantly going to remind people of what occurred so that we never lose sight of the past. Because when you know the past, you can interpret the present. And when you interpret the present, you can predict the future.
Memory and imagination being these two pillars. Well, the memory grounds us in our origin, and the imagination takes us into a future. And they both go hand in hand.
I personally believe because we are the closest thing to the Most High. And I think because of our melanin, because of who we come from, we are literally the closest thing to God on this earth, at least.
We are the practice. When we walk in the world, we literally are a divine spirit radiating and resonating to other divine spirits. And sometimes we'll create a practice that simply activates that divinity in us.
So it's a cosmological drama being explained through mythology, being implemented into the consciousness through rituals, and being carried on as custom, something that is repeated by a group of people over time to represent principles, concepts, and ideas. At this point, you've got religion.
So our plan was to stop between each of the segments that we wanted to present and give you guys a little chance to talk, comment. We've set aside 15 minutes for this, so 5:30. So I will just say that this was a real revelation for me. I have practiced some Indian religions, and I understand that those aspects are just symbolic, that there is only one God. But sometimes you really need to be able to relate to these different aspects just to make them more real to you. I did not have that full understanding of the depth of the Assyrian drama, for instance, and I really, it was quite a revelation to me. So, thank you, Damani, for that. Damani, do you have anything else? You know what? I can't hear you, Damani.
Oh, my fault. Yes, I like how he started off with myth and rituals. Before you go into the other chapters, the next chapter is Kemet, and I don't think we're going to show that one tonight. But before you get into ancient Kemet, you had to understand the mythology, the allegories, and I spent like 2 hours going over this first part and really understanding it. But Dr. Sheikh Cord really he breaks it down to me. He talks about it being a culture container, mythology as being an encoded culture container that contains our science and spiritualities is within a container, encoded culture container. And I think we're going to show a little 5-minute clip of Dr. Sheikh Cord explaining this. And I think that will, he articulated a lot better than I can articulate it.
You want me to push that now?
Well, if anybody else got anything to say.
Anybody else comment?
Well, I'll just chime in. I think in listening to Professor Kagame, Dr. Nobles, Professor Smalls, and talking about myths, I think they gave one of the more comprehensive explanation for the term myth that I've heard. It made the concept a lot clearer for me.
Yeah, I just take it as a recipe. It says if you want to have a life or a society like this, here's how you can do it. And here's how the people have to work together, interact, and they do this in a time when there's just stories and you can pass that on and you say, how will we do this? And you go to the myth and says, here's what happened and here's how our ancestors dealt with that. And because here's where we want to go. We want our society to move in this direction. And here they're giving us a story, a book of how to do it.
Also, it was very important that they pointed out that a myth is not equatable, like saying, oh, it's a lie. And particularly when you talk to a Christian and say something on the level of, well, Christianity and whatnot is a myth, then right off the bat, they say, Christianity is not a lie. Well, no, it's not about that. But because they don't have that deeper understanding of it, and maybe haven't read some of Joseph Campbell's stuff on myth, then they just don't really have a good understanding of what a myth really is. That's my comment on it.
I have a question. I joined a couple of minutes late, did it start early tonight? I mean, at 7 or at the regular time?
It started at the regular time. We started at for us on the West Coast, we started at about 5:05.
Okay, and my question is, what is it? What is the name? Is this Out of Africa? Out of Darkness? I'm sorry.
The name of the film is Out of Darkness, Heavy is the Crown.
Okay, and the reason I asked is because I also caught myself looking at it before the class tonight. That's why I was joining a few minutes late, but mine, Out of Darkness, must be the part one or a different, it's totally different. But it's got Professor Small, so I was just curious. I'm enjoying that. Thank you.
Yes,
Go ahead.
Ripper, Amadeus Christ did two, he did two documentaries. The first one was called Out of Darkness, and this one is called Heavy is the Crown. But he do have the title Out of Darkness on the DVD.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I
Right.
got this one from Leonard Jeffries about 4 years ago.
Okay, yeah.
I think also too, another word, and Minister Shango brought this up. So we have the word myth, but we also have the word parable. And if you look in Matthew, I think it's Matthew 13, the apostles and Jesus are sitting around talking, and they asked him, they say, why do you talk to them in parables? They're asking that, why do you, and he's saying, well, because, okay, you guys know what the meaning of the parable is, and, they haven't been studying with me, so they don't know, so another word for myth is parable.
Yeah, amen.
Yeah, that's Matthew 13:10 through 12, for those of you that would like to do some research on that.
Okay.
You guys are really a ponderous group.
Well, I like how he points out in Dr. Shaker Core points out, in creating these myths, it gives them higher spiritual principles of personality. Like a star, high spiritual principle would be good governance, or divine kingship, or Set, divine mother, great unifier. And so, looking at things metaphysically, Minister Imhotep be talking about looking at things allegorically, which is a symbolic narrative or a story narrative, or metaphorically. Metaphors are things you don't take at face value. You don't take at face value. You compare it to something that you can relate to. And metaphysical, deeper spiritual principles and metaphysical principles of love and unity and courage. All those, we'll get into that in the Saurian drama. Anyway, that's enough out of me.
What year was this made? Oh,
This year, 2022.
thank you.
Anyway, just like briefly, he said, this is one of the slides that I made. So he does talk, just so you know, the personalities and that he just mentioned are right here. Asar is divine kinship. Set is the divine mother, the great unifier. I'm assuming you can see my screen, right?
We can.
Kiru is courage and willpower, and then Set is chaos or Isfit. Chaos is spelled wrong. Anyway, so let's go on then to the next.
Can I just add something? And this is actually stirring the pot, as it was. But 15,000 years ago, Set was the good guy.
Oh, tell me more.
Set was the good guy. It's cultural. So some people think that Martin Luther King was not revolutionary enough, and Malcolm was the revolutionary. You know, that's the interpretation of the times, you know, the 60s onward. But in the future, say 200 years from now, how will Martin Luther King be viewed as opposed to Malcolm? Just as an example, you know. So it has to do with the times, and you know what's going on and people's view of things. So I just wanted to put that out there because people are always saying, well, Seth is this and that. You know, at one time, Seth was the good guy. That when I found that out, I thought, wow, you know. So, yeah.
What about Isfet?
Isfet and chaos. Well, so Isfet, chaos in creation. So if you think that just nothingness is chaos, then okay, that's your point of view. That's where you are. Or when creation came into being, that's the order. It's just how you would view it. And it's from your perspective. I had a different perspective when I was 5 than I do now, and I'm about ready to turn 65, you know? So.
Now, doesn't Isfet do battle with Heru on the sailing of the bark of Ra? Isn't he battling with Isfet during those dark hours?
That's one of it. And then, okay, what is darkness? I mean, really, I don't want to just sound, you know, just really philosophical, but what is dark? Aren't we always in darkness? You know, isn't darkness what's holding everything together? You know, when they go like millions of light years away, that space in between the stars is the darkness. That's what's holding the universe together.
If I could add to that, Baba.
Go ahead.
And this conflict between, I believe it was Set and Asar, which caused the dismemberment of Asar, begat the ascendance of Aset and Aset's power and magic to put it all back together. And as I was instructed in the use of these Kemetic iconography, is that Set or Isfet or the chaos is necessary to prompt growth and transformation. If it wasn't for the darkness and our disapproval of stubbing our toe on the furniture that's in the room, there would be no incentive for some people to turn on the light or to create the light to be turned on. So therefore, like the yin and the yang, these dualities, these polarities in Kemetic culture do travel together. Our challenge is subjectivity at all points. There is no objectivity. In Christian and Western religions, they're very objective about it is or it isn't. But from our perspective, before we were captured, we were schooled in subjectivity at the very highest levels.
This sounds like a perfect time to start the Australian drama.
Yes. Yes.
Hey, Saraswati, Sister Saraswati, do you have the 5-minute clip of Dr. Shekhar Kaur?
It's not playing well. I will try again.
Okay.
And if I could just help a brother out, as I've known the brother for many years, it's Chike, Dr. Chike Akua. He's a brilliant scholar.
Oh, Chike Akua. Okay, thank you.
You know what? You know what? I just want to add just one more thing. He was just here in Sacramento. He spoke at City College, and you know, he called me, but unfortunately, I could not meet him. But he let me know that he was in, and we've actually had him on Black Knowledge Matters. We've had Chekwe Akua, Dr. Chekwe Akua. He's a really cool brother. Just talking to him just as a person.
Okay, here we go.
A culturally encoded container. That's something that you repeated multiple times in the film. And you actually already answered the question I was going to ask you is, how did we arrive at our knowledge of the Creator by studying nature. But I wanted to first get your explanation of a culturally encoded container as it pertains to our current situation. Because I remember Dr. Clark would always say, he referred to it as a cultural incubator. And he said we were taken out of our original cultural incubator and placed in a foreign cultural incubator. I know you already answered the question, but I wanted to get your take on that as it pertains to our understanding, our current understanding of God as a being versus God existing as one conscious entity and that being displayed in nature.
Well, when we talk about a culturally encoded container, I talked about, that was kind of like my definition of mythology. That our culture, our spirituality, our history, all of those things were encoded and placed in this cultural container that we call mythology. And in our original civilizations, prior to being attacked and invaded by the colonizers, there were varying degrees of initiation into this higher knowledge. Well, once we were invaded by the colonizers and those who sought to enslave and to conquer us, that knowledge had to be hidden from us. And then there were certain things we had to hold on to as well and not expose to those that were attempting colonizers. And so now, if you think of it almost as like a lockbox that has some of your most prized possessions in it, right? For so many, we're walking around with this gold mine, this treasure chest. As a matter of fact, the Bible says we have this treasure in earthen vessels, right? But many of us have lost the key of how to unlock the divinity within ourselves. And that's why I said that mythology, our mythology, is that cultural container that once unlocked can unlock this world of riches, of opportunity and insight for us to attain all that we would like to attain, for us to acquire all that we would like to acquire, for us to be all that we're intended to be. But for as long as we're ignorant of our traditions, as long as we're ignorant of our history, our culture, as long as we're ignorant of our way, and as long as someone can convince us that these things are ungodly, barbaric, and polytheistic, and all of those sorts of things, then what happens is this treasure chest of revelation, this treasure chest of knowledge and insight remains closed and unopened because so many of us are afraid to even look at it. And that was one of the biggest challenges of my ministry, was cultivating the courage to look at the things that others refuse to look at. I want to say that again, because I'm certain at some point you may have had to deal with that, brother. And I know many of our listeners have either had to deal with that or have family that are struggling with that. So again, one of my biggest challenges in ministry has been cultivating the courage to look at things that others are afraid to look at and address. Things that were outside of the circumference of what I had been taught, that were outside of what other people felt comfortable with, outside of what I felt comfortable with. But once I began to prayerfully and carefully examine those things, I was pleasantly surprised to find that there were some amazing revelations and things that would really bless my life and bless the lives of many other people that I've had an opportunity to teach and share these things with.
I wanted you to explain.
Wow, that was powerful. Yeah, I really like that.
We're going on to the next version.
Okay.
I had to quit it to get the other one to play for whatever reason. Hope you guys are enjoying this.
We are.
Very informative.
Yeah, one time I brought him into Wose when I was the commissioner of economic development, and he did a presentation there at Wose in Oakland.
And how you pronounce his name again? Anyway, we'll talk about it later.
Dr. Chika Akua. Chika.
Chika Akua.
He pronounces it Chika.
Chika. Okay, I got you.
Okay, you guys go ahead.
Well, in my studies, I think that we have the Holy Trinity wrong. You know, as I dive deeper into, my history, I find that the Holy Trinity was not God the Son and the Holy Ghost. It was actually God, woman, and man.
One of the original dramas that comes to us, that much of the Greek drama and the Roman theater would come from, and even Western civilization, come out of this Osirian drama.
The Osirian drama is a story of the first Trinity, which came out of ancient Africa. It's a mythological story about the first king of Kemet named Asar.
There was a person named Horus. There was a person named Osiris or Asar. There's a person named Aset. So there's the myth of this family.
The divine king, Asar. In the Greek, he's referred to as Osiris. You have his divine complement, Aset. And in the Greek, Aset is referred to as Isis, okay? And they have a son, Heru, which in the Greek is Horus.
Where the father gets killed. The wife brings him back to life. But while he's still dead, she gets impregnated and produces a child called Horus.
Aset was impregnated by the spirit of her husband. Aset gave birth to his son, Heru, who was born to avenge the murder of his father and ultimately restored his father's kingdom.
Now, that's the myth, the story. How do I explain this myth? That's where the rituals come in, where we begin to practice this, what they call Osirian drama.
But in the essence of this story, the kernel of the story, the Osirian drama, is going to tell the story of this system of cosmic life.
It is the story about the redemption of the human spirit. In the story, Osiris, which represents the living element of earth, he's always painted green because he's symbolic of all of the vegetation growing out of the earth.
It is going to depict Asar, who is the male entity of the story, sometimes as green and sometimes as black. When Asar is green, they're talking about the botanical world. When Asar is black, They're talking about the melanated human world. He is said to have unified the two lands of Upper and Lower Kemet. He is said to have introduced agriculture, the ability of a people to feed themselves, the ability of a nation to feed itself. He is said to have introduced writing, literature. And he established a system by which a ruler could govern a nation and secure the livelihood of his subjects, of his people.
Asar had a beautiful wife by the name of Aset. He loved her deeply, respected her, treated her as his equal, and even allowed her to rule his kingdom whenever he would have to travel.
Asar married a sister by the name of Aset, who was his co-regent. Asar decided to travel to other parts of Africa to bring this knowledge to his brothers and sisters on the continent, to lift them out of darkness so that they can become a part of this great and mighty walk of humanity. And in his absence, he left his wife to run their nation. He left his wife not because she was his inferior, but because she was his equal. That he knew that he could not do this thing by himself, so he selected as a mate his counterpart, his equal.
One of the challenges that arises with the divine kingship of Asar is that his kingship is challenged by his brother, his wicked brother, who is jealous of his kingship, and his name is Set.
Asar had an evil brother named Set who was very jealous of him. He was jealous because of the power that he had. He was also jealous that he allowed his wife to take on many roles in politics.
It shows a conflict where the brother becomes envious and jealous of the other brother. Set becomes envious and jealous of Osiris because Osiris is in harmony. Set represents the tendency of disharmony. It's the concept we call cause and effect.
Now, according to the story, this myth, this act of allowing Aset to run this nation angered Asar's brother Set, who symbolically represents the forces of Isfet, confusion, anger, evil, if you will. It is from the word Set that we have derived the word Set or Satan, the forces of darkness, the forces of evil.
Expansion and contraction. So Osiris represents the expansion of the world, and his brother Set represents the contraction of the world. That is a constant conflict in nature.
And so Set tricks Asar, and he murders Asar.
Set plotted and eventually murdered his brother Asar. Depending on which version of the story you read, his body was cut into multiple pieces and scattered throughout the land.
Set cut Asar's body into 14 different pieces and scattered them all throughout Egypt. And so when Set learned about the murder of her husband, as you can imagine, she was deeply stricken with grief.
Set is distressed by what has happened to her husband, and now, not only has he been murdered, his body has been dismembered. And I want you to remember this word, dismembered. Dismembered means to cut apart. So now, not only does she have to find out where her husband is, she has to recover all of the different pieces and parts of her husband.
And so she went on a journey to find the missing pieces of her husband.
And in doing so, she has to recover a body that has been dismembered and remember it.
Set found 13 of the 14 parts of Asar's body.
Set went and she was able to recover the parts of Asar.
She found each body part, she washed it, and literally remembered them.
The pieces of Asar's body that Set did find, she gathered them, laid them out on the table, anointed them with oil.
She anointed it with oils, she laid them out on the table and remembered them and wrapped the entire body in bandages.
Wrapped them in bandages, creating the very first mummy in human history.
Thus creating Sahu. It took her 70 days to prepare him for burial. So 70 days within the Nile Valley became the time frame for the process of mummification for over 3,000 years. And as Set was about to bury her husband, she grieved as any wife would grieve because she was about to bury the man that she loved. She was still a virgin. They had never consummated their marriage. She grieved because she would not bear children by the man that she loved.
Going through a lot of emotion, dealing with the death of her husband, not to mention that she was a virgin. And so with her being a virgin, that would mean that there's no heir to the throne. And so she prayed to the spirit of her husband, Asar. She prayed to God to help her get through this very difficult time. And according to the story, the spirit of Asar heard Set's prayers. And so he came to her in the middle of the night and impregnated her.
Now, as the story goes, she was visited by the spirit of Asar. And as a result of being visited by the spirit of Asar, she was impregnated.
Osiris represents the masculine phenomena in nature, the reproductive, the reproducing, the regenerative energy of man.
The spirit of Asar impregnated his virgin wife, Set. And that 9 months later, their son, Heru, was born on the same birth date as his father. That birth date corresponds to December 25th.
The feminine phenomena in nature comes and reconstitute and regenerate the dead masculine phenomena and allows it to replicate itself and reproduce even though it had been killed. And so the son, Heru, is produced out of that fusion.
And that's how she gave birth to Heru, their son.
And it is Set, the feminine principle, the mother of God, that makes it possible for all these things to happen. She protects Asar and she nurtures Heru. She is what is the balance of all things in the cosmic universe.
To produce that regenerative force which saves the world.
This is the world's first story of a virgin birth, okay? And Heru rises up now to avenge the death of his father.
When Set learned about the birth of Heru, he sought out to kill every firstborn son. And so Set knew that in order to save herself and save the life of her son, that she would have to flee. And so she did just that, fled to the wilderness and raised Heru, taught him all about his father and the many things that he had done, and ultimately prepared him for the day in which he would do battle against his evil uncle Set.
The story of a Set searching for the missing pieces of her husband, a Set being impregnated by the spirit of her husband, a Set giving birth to her son among the bulrushes, and then preparing her son for his life's work.
Rising up to avenge the death of his father, he then has to fight Set. Set later becomes the archetype for what we now call Satan or Shaitan.
And so he comes to earth, and the first thing he does is to take on evil, which is symbolized by his uncle Set. And he fights against this darkness, and he's symbolized by light, and Set is symbolized by darkness. This child has come forth as the savior of the world. The very word hero comes from the word Heru, you see.
And so you've got this battle between Heru and Set, good and evil. And in the process of this battle between the two, Heru has to receive guidance from Jehudi. Jehudi, sometimes called Tahuti, is the messenger of the Neters, the messengers of the powers and principles, the heavenly host, who begins to instruct him on how to defeat Set.
Another temple in Kemet, the temple of Edfu, we find that story laid out on the walls where Heru confronts his uncle Set, does battle with him, spears him in every part of his body that corresponds to that part of his father's body that was dismembered.
In the heat of the battle, Heru's eye is knocked out, okay? And what this represents is the fact that he lost his spiritual vision in the heat of the battle. And so what Heru has to do is he has to reclaim his eye, or what has come to be called the third eye, the eye of all-seeing enlightenment. That's the eye of Heru, that we must have, that allows us to see beyond the physical dimensions into the mental and spiritual dimensions.
After he defeated Set, reclaimed his father's throne. And as the myth goes, was transformed into a falcon, flew into heaven, met with his father.
When Heru defeated his uncle, he took the form of a falcon and flew to heaven. To tell his father of this victory. And so at that time, Heru became the king of the physical world of Kemet, and Asar became the Lord of Judgment.
When Heru defeated Set, his father Asar was resurrected from the dead and took his place on the throne of judgment. Heru became the king of Kemet, so father and son ruled the physical world and the metaphysical world. They became the model for all human beings in Kemet. They became the pathway for life and the afterlife.
You see that when a pharaoh died, wrapped in the falcon wings of Heru, who is the resurrected savior. And in our ancient tradition, we have a child born of immaculate conception, Heru, being born to a Set. That child becomes the savior child that will go on to save the world. And each of our great leaders embodies that personality of that divinity.
There's several different pieces of that story that are in direct correlation to the story of Jesus. And it's amazing that most Christians don't know that the story of Jesus was told 12 times throughout history, but the names changed and the faces changed. And what most people don't know is that that story originated with the story of Heru.
What you're seeing is the family as the image of God, because there is a father, Asar. So the family as the image of God. Why? Because only the male, female can recreate and create. Nothing else can create. And only God can create. And so the symbol of God is the force and the element of the female forces of nature, the male forces of nature coming together, creating themselves. And themselves in that creation is the child. The embodiment of that male and that female is that child. So they didn't deposit themselves in the child, they deposited themselves as the child. So the child now is symbolic of the whole family and symbolic of the divinity itself.
So for me, I think it's very important to once again show people that most of the things that are valuable on this earth can be traced back to an African.
This story, this African story of an African Trinity, is over 6,000 years old.
And we began to celebrate certain occasions, like the Ethiopian on the 11th of September. That's their New Year. It's considered the oldest New Year in the world. But it's a celebration of the myth of Osiris, Aset, and Heru. And they celebrate the resurrection of Osiris on that day. And they celebrate the impregnation of Aset. It's a week-long celebration. But the rituals they do, the food they eat, the dances they do, the libations they pour, the prayers and everything, those are the rituals. But those rituals is trying to interpret to people the myth of the Osirian drama.
So I think the story of Heru is very important. As a matter of fact, there's not too many stories that are more important as it pertains to our history, especially since the story of Jesus has such an amazing effect on Africans. You know, to find out that, you know, that story was based on a person that looks just like us, I think that's the first step to setting our people free.
Wow.
Okay, that was the longest segment that we're going to see.
Imhotep, he knows all this stuff.
I know Minister Imhotep is like the whiz. And I have a quick question. I like to believe, I like the cosmology behind these stories, because I'm sure you could explain it, maybe not necessarily, hopefully now, but I know maybe in our class too, but I would like to hear a little bit more about how that was interpreted, or the overview of how it was interpreted, as opposed to this mythological story.
I bet there's a lot of ways to do it. I'm going to start before Minister, because I was really, just so touched by this. So one of the things that I thought about is when the king's body was broken up into so many pieces, I feel like that's representative of Africa. Like, we have been broken up into so many segments, and it was Isfet, it was chaos that did it. It was Seth, but it was chaos that caused it to came in and broke us up and just spread us out all over the world. And I feel like the part of what this is saying is that the feminine, the mother, has a great deal part to play in this resurrection that is required for us to remember. He kept saying that over and over again, because I watched it over and over again, but he kept saying remember, as in to bring the body back together again. And it was the queen that remembered, even in it, although it takes both of them to create. I just so anyway, I was really touched, and I interpreted in that way, but I bet because of the depth of this knowledge that there are many ways to interpret. Minister Damani?
This is so well done in so many ways. Dr. Charles Finch tells this version. So when you think of the story of Lazarus, if you take the L off, you have Asar, and he is, let's see, how does it go? So he's killed. He's in the grave for 3 days. And who's mourning him? Mary and Martha, which, okay, in the original story, Aset and Nebhet are there, and when he comes out, his hands and feet are bound like in a mummy form. So that's the general way that Dr. Charles Finch explains that, and that's actually in that's in Dr. Ivan van Sertima's in one of the Journal of African Civilizations. That whole story is in there. I prefer, this is me personally, and I know scholars differ. I prefer to use the word wasir, and I noticed in the clips sometimes you could see it written wasir. So me personally, just from my studies, I prefer to use the word wasir. But another part to that I noticed was, for me, Aset wasn't Wasir's equal. She is actually greater than him. And when you ever see the woman portrayed with the man, she has her arm around him, signifying this is mine. And if you look at her, the way you write her name, it's with the throne chair on top of her head. And when you write Wasir's name, it has that ever-seeing eye, and then the chair is there. So those are just little MO interpretations. Everybody has various ways to explain these things, and it's a journey. It's an internal journey, and I see it played out. Well, okay, how many colonies are there in the United States to begin with? 13, and the Washington Monument is the 14th piece. You know, that's another way to explain it as well. So I'm going to open it up for you all because I know you guys have things that you'd like to.
Real fast, I just like to point out a few things. It's also the story of Cain and Abel. We know the story of Haru and Asad, Asar and Asad fighting each other. Is the Cain and Abel story. Also, I know the brother a while ago mentioned Campbell, Joseph Campbell. He talks about how the Assyrian drama is the foundational story. And somebody just said 12 stories of Jesus told throughout history. And so it's the foundational mythology. Even say Star Wars, the first episode of Star Wars was based on Assyrian drama, Haru.
The Lion King is based upon, you know, Mufasa is Wasir, you know, Scar is Set. You know what I mean?
Right.
And Rafiki, who's a baboon, that's one of the forms of Chahudi. You know, right. But if you didn't know that, you know, you just you know, it would just pass over, just go over your head. Yeah. But they're always showing us all the time. Sorry to cut you off, brother.
No problem. There's so much in this video. Real fast. So one more thing, when they wrapped the Asar and become the first, you know, wrapped him in cloth, linen cloth, and he becomes the first Sahu, or the first mummy. That's the same thing they did to Jesus. I forgot the biblical verse, but they wrapped him in linen. And I can't remember who was saying it was reenacting his Kemetic heritage. It was reenacting his Kemetic heritage. And you heard it say, take the child on the bulrushes. Aset took the child and hid in the bulrushes. That's the same story of Moses. You see the story of Moses, 10 Commandments, they had the child in the bulrushes. All this comes out of our history and our culture. And I just want to point that out. Oh yeah, one more thing. The Haru bedhead at the Washington Monument in this book right here, the Washington Monument. I just left Washington, D.C. Inside the Washington Monument, above George Washington's head, they have a symbol of Haru's victory over Set. They have the you know, the moon and the two snakes, and the moon and like the two serpents coming out the side of the head above George Washington's head. And so this book is Egypt on the Nile. And so he explains how the founders of the writers of the I don't call them founding fathers, the writers of the Constitution was Freemasons, and they really was reenacting Egypt on the Potomac. Yeah, that's enough out of me.
So we have about, I think, 12 or 13 minutes left of the video for the judgment scene. So I'm going to start that now.
Could I just say one quick thing? I was thinking too, I was waiting for Minister Imhotep, but I know he has a way to say it. But I was also thinking, I like Rana Neffer's interpretation. I like to think more that these stories are how everything is hidden, and that it's dealing with the cosmology. They're talking about the sun and the movement of the planets in the universe. And these are just different states of mind and different levels of consciousness, but it's talking about the different universal forces and principles, and they're putting it in story form. And so that's where a lot of times I think we just keep getting, that's me personally thinking, we get stuck. Those are the way that's the way they keep it hidden. And I was going to say what Saraswati said about breaking up Africa or separating Africa. I was thinking also maybe even deeper, separating the races. But that's it.
You know what? That's very good. Can I just share this little thing, Saraswati, before you go? And this is the way I've been looking at these myths or parables. There's a literal, there's a historical, there's a cosmological, which Sister Judy just mentioned. There's a symbolic, metaphysical. There's a mythological, allegorical, there's an anatomical part to this. Anagogical refers to ascension. So these are all the things that myths and parables contain. And myth, parables, allegories, these are the things that they contain.
I love that.
You know, the scene, the Papyrus of Ani, which is called the Judgment Scene, is such a unique document that our ancestors have left for us to study. What is called the Judgment Scene in the Book of the Coming Forth by Day, or the Papyrus of Ani. And what you have is a man, and he's standing on one side of a scale. And in the middle of the scale is a woman figure called Ma'at.
So Ma'at was the center figure of the whole governance of ancient Kemet.
Ma'at, truth, justice, righteousness, harmony, balance, reciprocity, and order.
The structure of the universe being represented as Ma'at.
Galaxies, stars, the universe. This African feminine principle known as Ma'at.
And Ma'at meaning truth, justice, righteousness, reciprocity, balance, order, and harmony.
And so even the feminine principle, which is the center of Kemet, is Ma'at, and it's depicted as a woman.
Ma'at was pictured as an African woman with wings.
But when you look at the Genesis, it's that nutrient, it's that nurturing, it is that mother.
Ma'at is your mother. Ma'at is a set of virtues. I mean, the most we talk about them is that Ma'at is a set of virtues, and most of all we recite.
It's telling how you arrive at this order through these other behaviors.
But those are simply our way of codifying that which is, again, the inspiration for life. It is the utterance of your coming into being.
It is that which gives birth to whatever essence is going to have the experience that will build towards Ma'at.
I'm rising to the high priest. So the high priest level is that I'm responsible for all my actions and I'm knowledgeable of it. It's not I don't have any faith, I have wisdom. And now this intellect of my wisdom is going to elevate me and my people.
Now this is the world's first representation of what would later show up in Christianity as a heavenly host such as an angel, okay? So we've always had this concept of the divine feminine.
With an ostrich feather. And the ostrich feather, because the ostrich bird, each of his feathers is in perfect symmetry. Okay? If you ball it up into a knot, it'll spring back, coming back. That's why you have people say truth pressed to the earth will rise again, because the truth cannot be hidden forever. It will come back. So that's the way they looked at Ma'at. So this feminine energy.
And all we've done is then give some rules, some regulations saying this is what it looks like in practice.
This is all about good character. Good character. Why do you have the oracles of Ma'at? To develop good character. People who have good character make your nation flourish. So that means that the words you speak have to be powerful, the things you do have to be powerful, and the things that you represent have to be powerful.
What governs the living? And that's what we become important for us to have a set of virtues or values that says this is what you look like when you walk in the world as this divine being.
So that's how we judge a person's character, not by what you say, but by what you do.
A mythological story came out of the existence of Ma'at, and out of this there's going to become a ritual, which is going to be the judgment scene.
So the judgment scene now is depicting what happens when you follow Ma'at. It says the reward for Ma'at is to receive Ma'at. So not the pie in the sky. You give Ma'at, you receive Ma'at. The judgment scene is showing you how you have to be accountable to everything in your life.
The soul of the deceased would have to stand before Asar on Judgment Day, and they would have to confess these admonitions.
So Inpu leads you to the scales. He's the guardian. That's the only way you can get in. So Inpu guides you into the house of the double halls of Ma'at.
One must walk into the hall of Ma'at, double Ma'at.
In that judgment scene, the next most important thing is sitting in front of you is the scales. And the scale on one side has your heart, which means I have a collection of all your deeds, your intents, your nature. And then I have the feather of an ostrich, which is perfect symmetry.
And one's one's heart, is placed on one side of the scale, opposite the feather of Ma'at.
And what has to occur here, in order for him to proceed into the kingdom of the divine, his heart, his deeds on earth must be so righteous that they're lighter than the feather.
You look at someone who stands on truth. You look at somebody who understands reciprocity. You look at somebody who believes in the idea of our oneness.
So you got perfect symmetry and harmony. And then you got the heart, which is judging all the things that you've done. And then you got judges on top.
And then above the head is 12 persons who the man is pleading to tell him, I'm worthy. And you have 12 judges, like the 12 disciples. And you have God, and you have a priest symbolizing the institution of religion or theology.
And it is at this moment, this critical moment in one's life, where one had to declare your innocence, to say that you have not stolen, you've not robbed, you've not committed murder.
And the judges ask you a question. Have you stolen? I have not stolen. Have you killed anyone? I have not killed anyone. Have you taken the possessions of the temple? I have not. Have you done ill to any woman? I have not. You know, so you're saying these things that I have not done, and I will not do them.
I have not eavesdropped. I have not turned my ear against the truth.
I have not killed. I have not wasted water. I have not defiled the temples. And so therefore, Ma'at represents as a feminine principle the very nature upon which your heart is going to be judged.
The law of reciprocity now doesn't mean you've never done anything wrong. It means that if I've done something wrong, I have done something correct to balance that. See, in Judaism and Christianity, you can do a whole bunch of bad stuff and say, I repent. And then you still think you're going to heaven. That means 60 years of bad stuff, one day of repent, and now you're going to heaven. That don't even make no sense. That's not no law of reciprocity. That's not balance. So reciprocity means not only have I corrected what was wrong, but I compensated that which was bad, which I did bad, for when I was doing something wrong. That's reciprocity.
On the other side of the scale is a man with a pen, the ibis bird, keeping the record and recording this measurement, but also having the record of the life of that man so that he can see if his life actions warrants him going into what in the West we call heaven.
And it was her husband, Tehuti, the ibis bird, that would be the wisdom and knowledge.
But Jehuti has the record of your whole consciousness down. Jehuti is your higher consciousness. So to have your balance doesn't mean you never did anything wrong. It means those things that you have done wrong, you showed good character by correcting it. See, because let me say this here. Even the road to Ma'at means that you have done a lot of things wrong to correct it.
If your heart is heavier than the feather, it's going to come down as the feather goes up. And there is an entity, the devourer of evil hearts, known as Amit, who is a combination of hippopotamus and crocodile and lion, waiting to eat your heart, to be able to take in your injustice.
Now, you know, each one of them is terrorizing. You don't want to deal with the lion. You definitely don't want to deal with the crocodile. And the hippo kills more people than any other animal on the African continent. But you've never seen a picture of somebody's foot hanging out Amit's mouth because it's spiritual. So he devours your soul because only your soul is going. You're not going. Your soul is going and being judged.
Manipulating the scale is the symbol of judgment. Anubis, who's making sure that the scale is not tampered with, that the balance is correct.
And the feather of Ma'at, righteousness and justice, is going to be placed on the other. And if your heart is lighter than the feather,
and you have found true voice, then Haru is next.
Then he is escorted by Haru, the Son of God, into the kingdom before his father.
Haru takes you to meet his father, who is seated on the throne of judgment.
then you will sit with Asar, the God of all.
And Haru is the son of Asar. And that's why in Christianity they say, the only way to my father is through the son.
And so in our Western tradition, it says you cannot enter the kingdom before the Father except by the Son.
None comes to the Father except through me.
And that's done there. The Son of God, once your deeds prove you're worthy of going into the kingdom, escorts you into the kingdom before the Father.
Haru takes that person and leads him to his Father, who art in heaven. Hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done.
Who then makes the final disposition as to where your soul goes and where your next life begins.
And then you see the wings above that as a person is ascending to heaven to become one of the revered ancestors. So this is extremely important.
And while in that celestial realm, they would evaluate their life. They would look at their successes and their failures, and then prepare to be born again, to come back as an ancestor in a new body and work toward the fulfillment of their soul's evolution.
And so you have all of the elements of all of the Western religions, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, embodied in this one document.
So in Kemet, we have the oldest expression of a creator, of a resurrected creator, of a soul, of the process for the salvation of the soul.
And it's a beautiful story, you know, when you look at it, because it's a universal story. It's the story of the universe. It's the story of cosmology. It's the story of creation. It's the story of recreation, or what we call resurrection.
To prove the one has lived a righteous life, of principles of Ma'at, principles to live up to. All of this was a part of the African cosmos, the African consciousness, expressed in their understanding of the relationship between heaven and earth and the human beings who move between these two dimensions of reality.
How do I build good character? How do I become a divine being within my body while I'm still alive? How do I transcend and take on the knowledge that my ancestors left behind? How do I tap into all of these premonitions that I've had? How do I use them? How do I make sense to them? How do I better the condition that I'm in and the atmosphere that I'm in? And so therefore, each person had an obligation to make life better than the one they previously had.
Wow, that is just an awakening within itself. I just say, you know, wow. If you were ever afraid to die, this is something that can say, oh no, there's nothing to be afraid of. And it also holds us accountable for our character. Wow, that's all I need to say. Thank you also.
Just absolutely beautiful. And as part of, we'll say, for since 1983, this story I'm aware of, and it is absolutely beautiful. And the other thing is the comparison to what Christianity says, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. They refuse to elevate the female to her powerful position of having been the one that created the Son. But this is just absolutely beautiful. But for me, my minister has given me this before. I have heard this and I'm aware. Absolutely beautiful presentation, Sister Saraswati and Brother Damon. Beautiful.
Yes, yes.
Yes. Absolutely, absolutely.
I always imagine, process of building good character in a nation. Could you imagine going around and seeing the judgment scene on buildings, or seeing everywhere you go, you're seeing the judgment scene, and you know that one day your character is going to be called to account. And I think somewhere I was listening to something. If you could later on in one of the chapters, they talk about, could you imagine 80%, 90% of the people in a country practicing Ma'at? You would have a wonderful civilization. Yeah.
I also really love the analogy the brother gave about, Christianity saying, oh no, well, you can just live your life and then on your dying bed, you can just say, oh, forgive me, and then you can just go to heaven. That never made sense to me. That never made sense to me.
Me neither.
This has been fantastic, and I think Saraswati noticed the passion and the urgency that Brother Damani, because he was bringing this up all the time, like, hey, you must see this. Has anybody? He was even. I went to a concert that he had produced, and he was even handing out DVDs of this video. And so I think, as someone has just said a few minutes ago, we really need to thank them for bringing this before our prayer view and letting us see. Somebody had written, hey, I've gotten my answer now. These are really powerful images, the way that it was displayed. And I'm also happy to say that at WOSE, we've had Professor Smalls, Dr. Akua, who else was there?
Tony Browder.
Anthony Browder. We had Anthony Browder in '93 in Sacramento, and he had just released his book, Now Valley Contributions to Civilization. I think Atlantis was 12 when that book came out. So I'm glad. Oh, Dr. Wade Nobles. Dr. Wade Nobles used to be a regular before he moved out of the area. He used to be at WOSE all the time. So I'm glad that.
Haba was here not too long ago, wasn't he?
Say again?
Haba was here not too long ago.
Right. He was here, I want to say November or something like that, maybe October, November. He was just here. Yeah.
And I've seen Tony Browder about 3 or 4 times, and I sat with Atlantis in a class that was taught by Chika Pua, about 3 or 4, JD and I. He's really, really good, Chika. He's got some good questions. But I also had some news to share. While we were on a quick break, I had a chance to talk to Professor Smalls to let him know that we were watching him and enjoying all of his knowledge. And he told me that he is available starting next Wednesday if we would like him.
Okay.
I'll be talking with him tomorrow.
Yeah. Call him right back after this and book him for that. Yes.
Yeah, I'll call. I'll call him.
All right. That's great. That's great. Hey, we have Mama Akanke on tonight, and I wanted to share this with her tonight. Special day tomorrow.
It's
the day that you were born. It's the day your mama brought you home. It's a special day. Let us celebrate. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. I'm gonna celebrate with you. Time to celebrate. Tell everybody. Come on, y'all. Come on and celebrate on your birthday. Come on, y'all. Hey. And many more.
Thank you, Minister Motep.
All right.
Happy birthday.
Thank
Happy
you.
birthday.
Birthday.
You know, I would like to ask, the videos that we've been watching, are they available? Where are they available?
Damani.
Yes, just you Google or just Google the title of the film, Heavy is the Crown, Amadeus Christ, Heavy is the Crown, and you can order one. You can rent it or order it. And if you Google it, you can rent it or order it.
Amazon.
Yeah, through Amazon. Or you can order it directly from Amadeus Christ. I think he goes through Amazon.
Yeah, he does.
And there's 4 more. We didn't see but 3 parts. There's 4 more parts to it.